So, this is our fourth part of the Venus and Love workshop, in which we are talking about love, relationships, our own self expression. And today we will talk about the dynamic. So, how to explore the way things change, in what direction, how to pinpoint also the more significant transitions, the most significant times when things really change, and potentially how we can see also kind of like, the energy behind certain changes or certain events in our life. And the most important method which can help us to do that is the method of secondary progressions. Secondary progressions show very deep changes, and also changes which are, like following us. It really feels like a flow, like there is a specific motion. And the changes indicated by secondary progressions are much more important than the transits, for example, which doesn't mean we should ignore transits. But if we want to see something deeper and also something which affects us for much longer time, then we need to look at our progressions. So today we will talk about the Venus progressions and how, basically, what should we look at? What is the most important there? How to define those phases. So first of all, we should keep in mind that Venus changes signs in progressions. Sorry. And those changes are not that common. They are not that often. And here, what's important to remember, when Venus changes signs, we don't forget about the previous sign. So, for example, if your natal Venus is in Libra and Venus moves to Scorpio in your progressions, it doesn't mean that you should get rid of the Libra energy, or it disappears, or it's no longer relevant. So, first of all, the natal chart is always our foundation, our starting point, and the progressions are building up. They are, like bringing up like new levels. If this was a game, then the progressions, they show what is the next level that we need to master. But the previous ones, they serve as foundation. So each of the previous signs also matters. And again, we are not supposed to forget about them or get rid of them. But when Venus moves into a new sign in progressions, this is like a new era in your life, really. And very often, even though it's not a guarantee, but very often around those shifts, Venus moving into a new sign, around those times, something major may happen in your life, even as an event. So, not just internally. I have seen many cases in which Venus moves into a new sign, and the person finds a new partner or gets married, or sometimes it could even be a child, something which emotionally is changing you. But if Venus is moving to a difficult sign, for example, to Scorpio, to Aries, then the emotional transitions might be more shaky, might be also more challenging. So Venus moving to a new sign doesn't guarantee incredible happiness and opportunities, but it shows something new coming into our life. And yes, sometimes it could just be internal, but in most cases, I see that, of course, it depends on the age, right? So if Venus ingresses in a new sign when we are 5 years old, then it's not relevant to think about partners. But emotionally, something in the personal life can change at any age. And then Venus stays in one sign between 20, 30 years. Potentially, it could be more if Venus gets retrograde, but it's a long time. So it's not something for a year or two. Venus moving into a new sign really defines a new direction. And also, it doesn't mean that we can get in touch with those new qualities right away. For example, if Venus is moving, let's say, from Taurus to Gemini, it doesn't mean that immediately you will feel how, you're opening up like a Gemini and you become very communicative in your personal life, or you are extremely open, or you're more superficial, or it doesn't mean that, the shift is like this. Basically, we have the whole period to adapt to those new qualities. But you may feel the changes at this time. And here also, one thing I have noticed from experience, we don't need to be like extremely punctual in terms of the exact time when the ingression happens. Of course, you can always check even the exact day when Venus ingresses in a new sign. But the changes are so smooth that you may start noticing something even before Venus has moved to the new sign, and also sometime after that. So usually 1 year before and after that, we may feel like like something major is changing. So yeah, it's a smooth change which takes some time. The other thing to consider before a shift. So when Venus gets to the last few degrees of any sign, basically, those last 3 degrees are considered to be critical, which means that something may start to feel a bit off. We may notice that we are kind of tired of something, or we want something to change, we want something new. And usually we don't really get it at this point. Usually we feel, like something can change, but it's not happening yet. So the changes happen in a more noticeable way once Venus moves into a new sign. In other words, in a very simple way, to put it very simply, when Venus gets to the last 3 degrees, we may notice some kind of frustration, emotional mostly. Something may feel like, okay, I want something else, I want something new, I want to change. So, and this is normal. This is normal. This is not the time to push things too much. It's the time to reevaluate, to reassess what you've been through, and what you kind of like, what is the experience you have gained? What are some kind of lessons that you have learned? And once Venus moves into the next sign, then it's time also for something new. And it wouldn't be constructive to try to look backwards and to try to return to something from the past, or Venus moving into a new sign indicates that it's time for the next step. So, yeah, an interesting case that comes to my mind just to remember the signs. Yeah, I was working with a client. Her natal Venus is in Gemini, and it's also strongly positioned, so you can sense this Venus in Gemini energy, more rational, more pragmatic in her personal life, with a bit of this hesitation. Gemini is always looking around and always, ready for some kind of adventure. And there could always be this, kind of like inner dynamic. And for many years after that, Venus has been in Cancer. And it was interesting when Venus moved to Leo. What happened was that a few years earlier, she divorced. And when Venus moved to Leo, in her case, also the interesting part was that it made trine with Uranus at the same time. So we'll talk about this in a moment, but this is also very important. What are the aspects? But in her case, it was Venus in Leo and at the same time trining Uranus. And it changed her personal life drastically, bringing so much more liberation, freedom, a really different type of relationship. It was literally a new relationship. And with Leo, the quality changed. The quality changed. From what I see, she really started valuing more herself, but also her partner, which is an interesting reflection also, how basically those things are connected. So this was, yeah, a really interesting example. And the sign will show us in which direction we need to develop now, which are the qualities that we should add. And if you want to make things also deeper and more interesting, you can keep considering also the signs of the sun, even the moon. The moon in progressions is very fast, but you can compare it to the natal positions. I will give a personal example because the details are in my mind. My Venus is in Scorpio and my natal Venus, and my natal sun is in Capricorn. And some time ago, a few years ago, my Venus moved to Capricorn. So for many years, obviously, it was in Sagittarius, and a few years ago, it moved to Capricorn. And this is important because from one side, yes, of course, I need to learn those Capricorn, like some kind of boundaries or certain level of control, certain level of responsibility, but it's essential that the sun is there. So it's like, they get closer to each other. And this can allow also, in a way, to get closer to your own values, to get closer to something that is really important to you. So, and my case is not an exception. This is very common thing, not for everyone, but very common because as we talked earlier, Venus is always close to the sun in one of the signs which are nearby. So there is a very high chance that at some point during your life, they will be in the same sign. It may happen in progressions, or progressed Venus may move to the sign of your natal sun. So if that's the case, this is really important because it indicates the potential to, I would say, to find this like more subtle inner alignment between different, I would say, like inner parts within yourself, like your desires, but also who you kind of like recognize yourself as, who you feel like, your true essence is. So definitely pay attention to those things. And one general recommendation, which will always help you, whatever you look at in the natal chart, whatever you're evaluating, if you take a look at the sun at the same time, it will always help you to understand more because the sun really is our deepest essence and foundation. So if you always try to see, okay, how can this work together with my son? Or what could this mean for the expression of my son? This will always uncover like a deeper understanding and layer. Like in my case, natal Venus is somewhere in another sign, but at some point it moves to the sign of the natal sun. Of course, the most important will be the time when they get in conjunction, but this will be for a couple of years, usually for around 4 years. But the rest of the time is also interesting and also shows this, the importance of getting to know yourself better, understanding more about your own values, your own desires. And of course, the sign will be very important. It will show you more. So those type of changes are really important. How to evaluate the nature of the shift. The first thing we look at is the strength of Venus in the different signs, and is there a significant difference? For example, Venus moving from Libra to Scorpio is a drastic shift because Venus in Scorpio is very weak. Venus in Libra is very strong, so the other way around. So from Libra to Scorpio, so from a strong position to a weak position. Or the opposite possibility, Venus moving from Virgo to Libra. Venus in Virgo is also very weak. Venus in Libra is very strong. So such drastic shifts are very important. Actually, very quickly, we may get through them from the signs. So when Venus moves to Aries, this is usually challenging because it leaves Pisces. Pisces is very strong for Venus. Aries is not comfortable. So this is usually a more drastic shift that may require from us to be stronger, to face with some kind of, sometimes it could be confrontation or something more intense is an experience. So Aries is not an easy ingression. But then from Aries to Taurus is the opposite. The dynamic is very uplifting because Taurus is the sign Venus rules, so really comfortable. Then from Taurus to Gemini. Gemini is not a weak sign, but it's weaker than Taurus. But it's not drastic. So here, usually, I don't expect some stressful events. Of course, we need to check at the aspects, but it really changes things. From Gemini to Cancer, it's not significant. I mean, in terms of strong, weak positions, doesn't change on this level. Like Venus doesn't become significantly stronger or significantly weaker. From Cancer to Leo also, there is a shift, but it's not noticeable in terms of the strength. From Leo to Virgo, it's more significant because Virgo is weak for Venus. So this ingression is not simple. From Virgo to Libra usually feels very uplifting because from a very weak position, Venus gets to a very strong position. So this is usually really noticeable. From Libra to Scorpio is challenging, from a really strong to a really weak position. So usually it's intense, can be dramatic, can be related sometimes even to some kind of losses. Basically, we really need to change. That's the most important. When Venus is in Scorpio, we need to change and transform. From Scorpio to Sagittarius usually is uplifting. It is uplifting. Not that Sagittarius is such a strong sign for Venus, it's fine, but because Scorpio is so intense, then Sagittarius usually feels like, something is also being liberated. Then from Sagittarius to Capricorn, this one is a bit tricky. Technically, Venus is not weak in Capricorn. Venus is actually pretty okay in Capricorn. But Capricorn is Capricorn. So whenever a planet moves to Capricorn, you need to face reality. You need to face with some kind of challenges, with more responsibilities, with potentially more work. So It's not necessarily easy, but it brings more stability. So I wouldn't say it's a difficult, really difficult ingression, but it's not an easy one also. Basically, it requires also some kind of maturing, growing up. Then from Capricorn to Aquarius usually is also noticeable, even though technically the strength is not so different. I believe for both of them, we assign 4 points out of 6. So should be kind of the same. But Capricorn and Aquarius are very different in their energy. So usually this one feels very liberating as well. And then when Venus moves to Pisces, from one side, this is a really strong position for Venus. But there is some kind of usually chaos also related to this, some really deep emotions. And it really depends on what is comfortable for us in the first place. This is another key to understanding better the shifts. What do I mean here? Venus moving to Pisces may mean different things for different people depending on their nature and what feels naturally comfortable for them. So, for someone, let's say, who is very Saturnian, with very strong Saturn, with a lot of Earth energy in the chart, Venus moving to Pisces from one side may feel unfamiliar, may feel kind of confusing, and the person may kind of like try to stay away from this for a while. On the other side, this is not a bad thing because the person may get the chance to add things that initially they didn't have that much. So any ingression is about that actually. So from this point of view, there are no bad ingressions. For someone else who, let's say, has more water energy in their chart, strong Neptune, let's say strong moon, for them, the ingression of Venus in Pisces will feel more natural. It will feel like, I know how to work with this energy. There is a chance sometimes that it might become too much, like, the person might become too watery, too sensitive. But overall, for this person, it will feel more comfortable than for the one with strong Saturn. And this may work in different variations. For example, Venus moving to Capricorn. Well, if you are, let's say, a very fiery person with a strong Mars, with a strong Uranus, this Venus in Capricorn may not feel so comfortable for you because it's not in alignment with the other energy, which is, more what you recognize as yours. Or, yeah, if you have more Earth energy in the natal chart, it may feel more like, okay, this feels natural. So, this is the other key to try to understand the nature or the character, like what is typical, what feels comfortable for this person. And then you will be able to evaluate the shifts better. That's also a very interesting approach. Let me see. You have some comments here. Progressed Venus in 29 Leo. So it's on the edge, time for some kind of recap and preparation for something new. And for example, Margarita, in your case, it would be interesting to check what's the case with the Earth energy in your chart. And you can check also Mercury, you can check Saturn, because Saturn is a Earth planet. And this will show you more if Venus moving to Virgo will feel more like, okay, this feels natural and normal to me, or it will feel, okay, it's time for me to learn something new, like I'm not so used to this energy. And if you want to do the analysis even deeper, you can check what's the case with the fire energy, where Venus is right now. For example, if you don't have that much fire energy in your chart, Venus moving away from Leo may not feel so, I don't know, stressful is not the word, but mm, may not feel so much like you are losing some of the fire energy. But the most important is to check the earth. Venus retrograde, I will talk about this. Yes, that's a good question. Venus retrograde in progressions. Alina, I'm not familiar with this website. I'm sorry. Um, but on astro.com, you can find tons of charts, progressions for sure. So there, I'm sure you can find it. Venus moving from Leo to Virgo, you need to learn to be more practical, more concrete, more grounded in terms of your desires. But again, um, you can check generally what's the status of the earth energy. Mhm. I mean, progress Venus in Taurus 20 degrees. I definitely felt the difference when it shifted from Aries. I also have Venus in Pisces at 29 degrees in the third house. Mm. Your Venus now is beautifully triggered by Neptune and Saturn in the transits. I hear you. I also have planets there, so it's a big one, really. For those of us that have planets now in the last degrees of the mutable signs, especially Pisces, but also Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, this time is very transformative. Okay, so um, I highly recommend you to look at the timeline of your Venus, to look at each ingression of Venus since you were born until you are 100 years, for example, and to see which are those signs where Venus is gonna pass through in your life, in your chart, especially the close ones. Like, where is Venus now, and which will be the next shift, and when, of course. And this gives a very interesting, like anticipation of the future, and also kind of like sensing in which direction you are going. So I find it really helpful. So the sign is very important, and the sign always changes. I'm trying to think of hypothetically, could it be? Because if Venus is retrograde for around 40 years, 40, 42 years. So theoretically, I guess, because Venus gets really slow around those times, so maybe Venus is retrograde, there might be a chance. Honestly, I haven't seen such an example. But for 99.9% of the cases of us, Venus changes signs in our progressions. So we can check them, find, the timeline. But what is the next thing which is not so obvious? To check if in your progressed chart, Venus changes the house position. And here there could be variations. Why is that? Because in the progressions, when we move the progress chart, year after year, the speed of Venus and the speed of how the cusps of the houses change are very close, around 1 degree per year usually. So that's why for many years in dynamic, Venus can stay in one house. And at some point, Venus may change its house position. Again, I don't talk about overlays, progressed Venus in your natal chart. This will change for sure. I'm talking about within the actual progressed chart. Probably we can see this with an example. It might be more obvious. So if you have such changes, they will not be many. Probably it will be one. So this is really important. I'm just thinking, yeah, I will show you this in a moment. I don't want to forget about Venus retrograde. So before we continue with the aspects, I just want to mention Venus retrograde. Some of us may have this, not everyone. Venus is retrograde once in 18 months. So the higher possibility is that you won't have Venus retrograde in progressions, which means that if you do have Venus retrograde in progressions, it's a big deal. It's important. That's also one general principle. The more rare something is, the more important it is. So if Venus is retrograde in your progressions, this is significant. The most important are the shifts from direct to retrograde, from retrograde to direct. Those are key periods. And I can give you an extreme example for that. A client I was working with some time ago had Venus turning retrograde, but it was also in a weak sign. I can't remember, was it Scorpio or Virgo? Let's say Virgo. Venus turned retrograde there. And during the year when Venus has turned retrograde, she has planned her wedding with a partner. They were together for a while. She knew him very well. And the night before the wedding, she caught him with another woman, like literally like the movies. And they canceled the wedding and so on. So this is extreme, but it happens exactly when Venus is changing directions. The more difficult one is from direct to retrograde. This is more difficult and intense. So there could be some kind of more difficult experiences around this time. Then for 40 years, Venus is retrograde. So we don't have the same intensity during the whole time, but Venus starts working more on an inner level. It might be more challenging to express something externally. We may need, this is like a lesson. Imagine this, when we have a retrograde planet, it's like we have studied some kind of lessons and we are studying and studying. And at some point we stop and we realize, oh no, I have to go back. There is something I didn't learn, or there is something I forgot, or I have to fix some kind of mistakes I made. I can realize this. So it's very similar in life. When certain planets turn retrograde, it's like, life is telling you, okay, you need to pause here and you need to go back and either fix something or understand better what was the point, or kind of like learn another perspective. This is not punishment. This doesn't mean that it's not about blaming yourself, because when you grow, you may see your past actions from a different perspective. You may understand them better. So we need to make this step backwards. But this step backwards is also a step closer to ourselves. This is definitely a time when we need to learn to love in a different way, to love ourselves, to accept ourselves in a different way. So it's very much also introspective. It's very much about the connection with ourselves, recognizing what have we done with our desires. Do we know what we want, or are we following this, or is this changing? Very often the retrogrades show that something changes in terms of our values. So it's very normal to recognize that the things that were important to you before or you valued before are no longer the same. And this could be like a path to find something more important for yourself. So it's an inner process. It's very important in which signs is Venus, and also if Venus will change the signs during the retrograde phase. Sometimes it may change it, sometimes not necessarily. In most cases, there is a shift, but not always. Sometimes it could be retrograde in the same sign during the whole period. And another key thing, check the aspects at the time of the shift. This also applies to the sign changes. As I told you about this example, when Venus moves to Leo and the first aspect is a trine with Uranus, this is also giving you a hint of, what is this phase about? How does it feel? Or also, what was the last aspect Venus made before leaving the sign? For example, Margarita was sharing that her Venus is going to move to Virgo. So it would be interesting to check what's the last aspect Venus has from Leo with the other planets in progressions. And it could be a while ago. It's not necessarily, at the exact last degree, depending on where are your planets. But this will show you more like kind of like how you leave this phase, or, like what are kind of like the last impressions of this period in your life. For example, and what do you need to check? Which is the planet and what is the type of the aspect? I have seen Venus moving from one sign to another, and the last aspect was some kind of harmonious aspect with Saturn, sextile. I think it was a sextile, so a nice aspect. But for the person, it felt like I need to cut something and leave it, behind me. Like I need to let go of something, I need to separate from something. And because the aspect is harmonious, it didn't feel stressful. It didn't feel like, other people are abandoning the person, or, like they are left alone. No, it was like a conscious decision, There are certain relationships which are no longer, needed or wanted. So, yeah, check the last aspect before the planet leaves the old sign, and the first aspect after the shift in the new sign. This will give you more information. And here I would consider also minor aspects, not only the major ones, even though the major ones, of course, are more recognizable. They will play a more significant role, but even the minor ones are important. And same principle applies to retrograde direct phases. When Venus is turning retrograde, you can check, are there aspects happening at the same time? And if there are, they will play a huge role because they will last much longer than usual. If Venus is moving with its regular speed, which is around 1 degree, sometimes a bit more per day or per year in progressions, usually the aspects last for year and a half, 2 years, something like that. But if Venus is slowing down and also turning retrograde, it can be an aspect for many years. It could be more than 5. Sometimes it could be 7, 8 years, even more. Mm, I don't think it can be 10 years, but much longer than usual for sure. So this will play a significant role. And it's one thing if Venus turns retrograde and at the same time it has a trine with Jupiter, let's say, and it's another thing if there is a square with Mars. It will show a different type of dynamic. So we need to pay attention to those. And the same is also when Venus turns from retrograde to direct, so at the end of the retrograde phase. Also check if there are the aspects at this moment, because they will also be much longer. And one final thing for Venus retrograde. So we have two major points, the beginning and the end. And the third is the middle of the cycle. The middle of the cycle is when Venus gets in conjunction with the Sun. This is the middle. And it shows also some kind of shift within the process. So usually the first half until the conjunction with the Sun may feel more challenging. After the conjunction with the Sun, it's like symbolically you can connect to something deeper within yourself. You may understand something more. It's almost like, you can find like a missing part within yourself. So the second half of the cycle is different. The dynamic is different. But also check the aspects, if there are any. Let's say Venus in conjunction with the Sun, and at the same time, there could be a trine with Neptune or any other aspect. So this will also uncover more. So beginning, the middle conjunction with the Sun, the end. We check the signs, we check the aspects, and yeah, based on that, we can understand more. There is one other step which is even deeper. It's a big step, so I will not describe it in details now, but what we can do is we can check the shadow zone of Venus. The shadow zone is when Venus has passed the same degrees, first direct, then retrograde, then again direct. And usually this goes beyond our lifetime. And I'm just giving this as to have it in the field, that it's possible, that you can look deeper by exploring the shadow zone of Venus. But again, this will lead you to something which is, in a way, beyond this life also, which can be very interesting as well. Okay, let me see if you have questions. Do we also look at the new house placement and give them weight, or is the sign itself more important? Yes, we can evaluate the house. How does it feel? Like, what is the nature? Yeah, that's a good point. For example, it's one thing if Venus is moving from, let's say, fifth house to sixth house, and it's another thing if Venus is moving from sixth to seventh house. So, yeah, that's also interesting. The most important will be the time of the shift, when Venus basically gets to a cusp of a house. This will be the most significant. My Sun in Cancer is progressed 29 degrees of Virgo with Venus and Mercury. Interesting. Many lessons for my Venus. I think for all of us, Venus is always, this is always something that we relate to personally. With the other planets, Um, it might feel a bit more also external or more rational. Or with Venus, usually we take it very personal, like this is really, really about us and our own experiences because Venus is really connected to our experiences. So it's always very deep. It's always very, it does feel personal. Venus moving from Capricorn to Aquarius. Okay. Then you need to learn to let go of something, to experience more freedom, to love in a more, I would say, like non-formal way, not like everyone else. hmm hmm Thank you. It's a pleasure to share with you. Venus has moved from eighth to seventh house in progressions. Okay, that's a major one also. Eight is intense, may feel heavy for Venus. Seventh is like it's Venus. So this one is comfortable. In the future, it will go back to eight. Then it you will need to kind of like reevaluate or go back to something interesting, like something that needs to be processed again, deeper. Mm. Aspects are natal or progressed. I mean more the progressed. Even though we look at everything, so you can compare, but um, it's more relevant within the progressed chart. So progressed Venus with progressed planets. Using the progressed chart and the transits to the natal chart. Yes, of course, you can always use both methods. If you want to see, especially if you want to see something more kind of like for the near future. Yes, transits are also very interesting. There is one step deeper, which is to check transits with your progressions, which is another layer as well. So you can even do that. But they reveal different things. The progressions, they show this inner path. You may even call it like a path for growth or evolution, or um, it's something very personal that you are going through. The transits more or less bring something collective, even though this collective energy activates personal energies within you. But for example, right now, Neptune at the last degree of Pisces, we all feel this, like this is a collective factor affecting us in specific ways, but it's universal. In progressions, everyone has their unique story. We don't have those things that are kind of like collectively like a background. The transits are always like a background for all of us, a background which again pulls or activates the energies that we already have. But this is very important, that the transits, they connect us more to something outside, which more or less also includes other people. The progressions are completely personal. It's like, they are completely from within, which doesn't mean that they are not related to external events. They can totally manifest also as external events, but your experience is unique. My sun is also progressed Taurus 27 degrees, Mercury 2 degrees. A lot of Venus energy right now. Taurus, yeah. Yes, this is also interesting when other planets move to Venus signs. Positive, happy Venus retrograde stories. Mm, hmm. I can't think of honestly other examples right now. Ah, yes, yes, I thought of one. Venus turning from retrograde to direct, which is also intense. So it's also, like it's transformative, something very deep within you is shifting. And for this person, he had kids. He had actually twins at this time. And this has been very heart opening for him. And it's interesting that before that, he also has other kids. And of course, it doesn't mean that he didn't love his other kids before that, but with those kids that were born after Venus shift or at the time of Venus shift, he was more able to express this, to share this, love and joy and excitement. So that's a happy story. How would you say the progressiveness works when it's alongside other progressions that are in the same sign? Which house system do you use? I use only Placidus. I'm not switching in between. I can use the equal house only if the chart is very distorted. Sometimes, depending on where the person was born, the houses might be, like huge and others tiny. So only then I may switch to equal house. Other than that, I always use Placidus. It works great. For the other question, I can't give you a very specific answer. How progressed Venus works when it's alongside other planets in progressions. Um, you need to check which are the planets and also how strong they are, each of them in this sign, and especially when they get in conjunction. And each story will be unique, so it's very difficult to, you know, give some kind of concrete recommendations for that. Explore the nature of the planets, uh, which one is stronger in this particular sign, and when they get in conjunction, if they get, because sometimes they may not necessarily be in conjunction. Would you consider it significant when natal Venus aspects progressed Venus? You mean progressed Venus makes an aspect with the natal one? Um, this can happen. I mean, it happens, yes. Um, Nonagon, which is the 40-degree aspect, 45, which is the semi-square. Well, why not square also later in our life? To be honest, I haven't explored this that much, uh, but it's more about some kind of inner realization or inner shift because, it's Venus with Venus. So it doesn't activate, like external energy. It doesn't activate energy from other planets. So it may indicate some kind of shift on the level of Venus, but honestly, I haven't dived into this. It's an interesting topic, by the way. I may look into this. So if I see something, I will definitely let you know. That's a good suggestion for something which is not that typical. Sure. We won't have that many possible aspects there. We will have the 36 degrees semi quintile. We will have the nonagon 40. semi-square 45, and then 60 sextile. So yeah, good question. Mhm. Okay, I want us to look at an example. Is there anyone who wants to volunteer, who would like us to look at their Venus um, in the past, how it has worked? Mhm. Okay, Ani, let's do your chart. And we don't need to go too deep into some kind of personal details, okay? So you can, you know, decide how much you would be comfortable, okay? To share or to, explore together. Can you send me your birth details? I don't think I have your chart, or maybe I do. Mhm. Ani. Hmm. My favorite town, Sofia. I guess it's in the morning, right? 5:17 in the morning. Perfect. Actually, let me share my screen. Mm. Sorry, again, I have to. Okay. So this is the natal chart. Interesting. Venus is in Virgo, which is not comfortable for Venus. But Venus is close to the South Node. Venus is ruling fourth, 11th house, ruling also the moon. And look at the aspects. The aspects are actually quite harmonious. Sextile with Jupiter, semi-sextile with the Sun. This is a really nice one. Trines with Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn. Interesting. Here, the issues are more with Mars. Mars is on the South Node, and Mars is part of a more challenging configuration with the Moon, Saturn, Neptune. So, yeah. But Venus has many harmonious aspects. Only this one is the centagon with the Moon. But both of the feminine planets are in Earth signs, which shows some kind of I would say like inner harmony. The Sun is in Leo, which on the other side needs some kind of dynamic, needs more. And the Leo energy is very strong in general. We have also Mercury, Mars, the South Node is in Leo. But the two feminine planets are in Earth signs, and also the Earth energy is very strong. Hmm. Interesting combination. From one side, there is an impulse to do many things, to be active, to kind of like, do it my way, and also a lot of strength. But at the same time, because of the Earth energy, five planets in Earth signs, the moon is in an Earth sign, Venus, there is a feeling of also certain skill of, I would say, like some kind of self-control, which doesn't mean that it's there all the time. Mars is squaring the moon, so maybe sometimes there could be some kind of, like impulse to do something more drastic, but overall I get the sense of some kind of skill to control yourself. A lot of self-control. This is very interesting because it indicates that just to try to formulate this, your energy is not too raw. It's not too, immature, or because sometimes the fire, if we don't have other indications to bring some kind of control and awareness, if we don't have this, then the fire can be too explosive, sometimes brutal, sometimes too, like selfish, or especially when Mars is in a fire sign with the South Node. So if you didn't have the Earth, well, there is no point, to talk about hypothesis, what would have been in other cases. But what's important is that in your case, we see that this is not just a raw energy to, explode, or, that you can't control. You can. So, yeah, it shows certain level of development, in other words. Mhm. Okay, and Venus is also on the cusp of third house. On the cusp of third house. Let's see Venus dynamic. And we will start from your birth. There is a push and pull between spontaneous actions and planning what is appropriate and best in the long run. Yes, I can see that, and I agree that there is such a thing. Yeah, but I wouldn't consider this as a disadvantage. You just have kind of like access to really, potentially constructive energies. So sometimes you can be perhaps overactive, I would assume, with this Mars, with this Sun in first house. Sometimes, yeah, it might be, like too excited, maybe even too much, but you won't get too carried away with this. It's almost like, sensing when too much might be really too much. With the earth energy, you can sense, some kind of boundaries when, even, yeah, this might be too much. So, but you won't stay too much into because too much earth energy can keep us, too close to the ground and not moving much. So you may have some such phases, but again, they will switch. They are not permanent. So you just need to learn to navigate this better and better. You already have it. You just need to learn to switch I would say like to switch faster according to what would be best for you, what would be needed. But this can be a very, I would say, constructive, productive mechanism. So let's look at Venus. Yeah, actions, actions, and then rest a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. Aquarius here is very important. That's what you need to develop more. The Aquarius energy, because your North Node is there. That's a deep topic. There is something you need to learn around priorities. Mm, and to be able to see some kind of like equality, I would say, to give place to different things in your life at the same time, not to exclude, because there is a chance that you might be excluding something. You know, for a while it's one thing, then it might be other thing, but and Aquarius is about integration, like, you know, we are all equal and we are all important. So on an inner level, that's about you and perhaps different priorities in your life. Okay, let's see Venus. So I'm moving with 1 year. Each step changes 1 year. So we are starting from 1989 and now it's 1991. So next year, for example, here we see earlier in during childhood there has been trine with Saturn, then with Neptune, which is interesting. So the first aspects that Venus is making after the birth are harmonious major aspects, also in the earth signs. Did you enjoy learning? Did you like it? Like the school and all of this? How was it for you? Yes, then we have creative aspects with Uranus, with Jupiter. And pay attention that Venus is still in third house. So Venus will not change fast its house position. Yeah, yes, that was saving space. Home wasn't good. Yeah. The the school is infomaniac. Okay. Makes sense. You see how, you know, in the chart you can see it right away. Also, the other thing is that Mercury has moved to Virgo as well, which probably has added even more desire, you know, to learn, to have some kind of structured knowledge and all of this. But it starts from Venus. So it starts more from, there is some kind of, you know, like emotional component there. And see, Venus is still in Virgo. Another harmonious aspect with Saturn. Here, there is the first aspect, which is interesting with Uranus. This is challenging aspect with Uranus around 2003. Here, I won't try to be like too precise. 2003, 2004 also. Do you remember if there was anything more stressful around this time? Or some kind of shift? 2000, basically between 2003 and 2005. Interesting that Uranus is also on the cusp of sixth house. And you don't necessarily have to tell us the details. So you may just say there was something if you don't want to talk about it, or you can't remember, that's also totally fine. So I had an accident at school and everybody laughed at me. That's all I can recall. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but from progressions, you can see that it's important. Mm-hmm. And why do I say that it's significant? Because I kind of see it in advance that Venus, well, unless Venus turns retrograde, but if Venus moves with this speed, Venus will get to Libra and will square Uranus from there. So there will be another aspect with Uranus. That's why, this previous Uranus aspect could be also, it's not necessarily about the same thing, but could be a hint. So let's continue. Here there is a semi-square with Pluto. 2008, 2009. Mm, and this is important now. Venus is about to change signs to move to Libra. Technically, it happens 2011. But before that, let's see which is the last aspect. And here we need to find exact aspect. So if it's applying, but it will be exact in the same sign, we don't take this. We need to find the exact one. It will be Centagon with Neptune. So not such an easy, like the end of the face may not be so simple. Interesting. And then 2011, Venus moves to Libra, and shortly after that has a square with Uranus. And Uranus is in fifth house. This could be either something important in the personal life or a relationship. Annie, do you remember around this time, 2010, but also 11, 12? If there was anything major, unexpected love, that was very unconventional. Okay. It's like, written there. Shifted my perspective about myself. Yeah. Textbook. Absolutely agree. Absolutely textbook. It's in Libra, so it's very transformative from Virgo to Libra and square with Uranus. So it really kind of like, opens up some boundaries. And also look from this perspective. Venus moves out of an earth sign, which on its own brings some kind of liberation. When the planet, moves away from the earth, we have less restrictions, less forms, less shapes, any earth sign brings those shapes and forms. So one thing it's out of earth sign, and the next thing is major aspect with Uranus, which also is very opening. Reinvention of the self, but it was traumatic. I became more open for relationship. Before that, my love was studying. Yeah. It may feel shocking or even traumatic because it's a square. But here is the thing that such things can really open up your heart. Very often it happens also through some intense, or maybe at the moment we may feel them as painful emotions. But it's something that has taken you, or like shaken you out of this earth energy. The That's the point. Hmm. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, after that, there was a nonagon with Pluto, which is also intense. And then there is a square with Jupiter. It's not like a really, negative aspect, but it still brings some kind of possible frustration or something is different than we have expected it to be. Oops, that's too much. This is a good one. Around 2016. Look at this. It might be a bit difficult to see it because the planets are very close to each other, but Venus has a green aspect with Pluto, semi-quintile. Another one with the Sun. The Sun is making an ingression in Virgo, and the Sun also has a quintile with Pluto. So we have a small green configuration. Venus is the focal point. So, was there anything significant in your personal life around this time? It could be, let's see, it could be 2016 or 17, if you remember anything. Mm-hmm. Not sure. Okay. It could be something in the surrounding because also third house cusp is changing. So it could be with friends or the circle around you, or it could be some kind of interest also, like something new that either something new that you get interested in, excited about, or it could be something old, but it's like, you become more passionate about it because it's in third house. Course or schooling could be, yeah. But it's a potential for that in every case. Okay. After that, Venus has another aspect with Uranus. So, see, this is interesting when Venus has a few aspects, different types of aspects with the same planet. I started having a deeper interest in astrology around that time. Do you mean the previous one around 2016 with the green aspects, or this one with Uranus? Uh-huh, 2018. Yeah, interesting. I read extensively a few years before. Hmm. Um, Here we also see, by the way, square with Saturn, Venus with Saturn. So would you say that this time was also maybe somehow difficult emotionally or personally, or that maybe you needed more structure or something like that? Financially. Yes, also an option. But you see, this is an interesting connection. So, what is the reason if there were, let's say, some financial issues? Um, Venus squaring Saturn, then there will be square with Neptune. So, it's more on the level of, what can I can allow myself to have. It's the root of that is emotional. Could be also related to some kind of sense of value. But, Venus is about how much joy and love I can experience and I can allow myself to experience. So, if there are financial issues and we see such aspects, what I would explore is, and what I would work on is why you, for example, limit yourself in terms of what kind of pleasures you can have, because money is always about, also what kind of things you can allow yourself to have. So the root is emotional. I worked as a translator freelance, but I wasn't sure I was good enough. It's not well paid field anyway. Yes, it's about the self-value. But see that the sun trines Uranus, so this also supports your astrology studies at this time. Also explains it. Okay. Yeah, then with Neptune, with Uranus again. So many aspects with the outer planets. Well, with Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. That's interesting. In your case, another one with Jupiter. Another one. Aha, this is now 2025. Right now, you have aspects with Jupiter and Saturn. Saturn is ruling sixth house. Fifth, Jupiter. This could be something more around social things, like some kind of fulfillment, or maybe not so much from work-related things or from, the things that you are doing in the evaluation. Probably. Okay. Yes, the trine between Venus and the Moon, I saw it, but it's a very short-lasting aspect. It's an aspect which lasts around 3 months. So it can bring really, pleasant stuff, but it doesn't have the same status. That's why I skipped it. Because if we consider also the aspects from the Moon, I mean, if we are looking at prediction for 1 year, absolutely, I would include those. But if we are, like doing this general overview, I'm not including the Moon. Like with my full-time job in February and focused on my astrology studies. That's great. Yeah. Aha, the Saturn aspect has worked this way. There will be another one with Jupiter, creative aspect, 2031, and with Saturn. This is interesting, around 2032. Saturn and Jupiter are in opposition, which indicates some shift, some kind of social shift, work related, career related, and Venus has creative aspects with both of the planets. This seems very transformative. And kind of like, getting closer to something that you evaluate as important. And pay attention that during the whole time Venus remains in third house, that it didn't change. So, because they change, they move with very similar speed. In progressions, it's in third house. If you look at progressions over the overlays of progressions with the natal planets, it's in fourth house here. But if we look within the progressed chart, it's in third. Mhm. Sure. And you have creative aspects after that a lot. So you will have a phase with many creative aspects. Venus with Jupiter, with Uranus, then with Saturn and Neptune. That's the interesting part. Well, one of the interesting parts. When someone has a stellium, a few planets which are close to each other, uh, it defines a lot because when there are some progressions, they kind of like follow each other. And this creates, like very long phases in our lives. This is also a reason why the stelliums are so important. Because you see, Venus, first of all, was doing like centagons, binonagons, so the karmic aspects. First with Uranus, then Saturn, Neptune. Then there is another wave of creative aspects, but again, they follow one after another. So, if you look in more details, you can also, like kind of like make a table with all of the aspects and follow the sequence, the logic. And then Venus, this is an interesting case. See, Venus will move to Scorpio around 2037. But at the same time, we'll have a sextile with Uranus. So the previous ingression, when was it? Around 2012, or when Venus moved to Libra, it moves to a harmonious sign, but there is a square with Uranus. The next ingression, Venus moves to a challenging sign, but there is a sextile with Uranus. Very different. So from one side, yes, this is intense, and it shows that, the emotions can become even deeper, even stronger. And Uranus at the same time has a sextile. This could be something that you can get really passionate and excited about. I would say obsessively passionate around this time. And so, yeah, this is what you should do. With such ingression, Venus moving to Scorpio, technically we should consider that this is a challenging one. So, what can you do in this case? Especially keeping in mind the sextile with Uranus, you need to find something that you would be really excited, passionate, I would say obsessed about, and to try to dive as deep as you can in this. It's in third house, so it could be something mental. It could be also astrology. It could be, like another step of going deeper into feeling more. Yeah, for you, mental is great. For you, it feels good. I'm terrified of having my Venus in Scorpio. It's enough to have a fifth house, Pluto and Sun, Mercury, Pluto aspects. Um, I understand you very well, but your Pluto energy is also strong. Like you have it. Your Pluto is stationary in the natal chart, which makes it very strong. And yes, it's on the cusp of fifth house. So this is not something which is so unfamiliar for you. So you should not be terrified. Okay, and then we can continue, but also this ingression can bring something major in your personal life. This ingression can also show, like it does show a new era, like a new direction. So, yeah, just work on your interests, work on your passion. And also, there is some time until this happens. So, until then, also focus more on your alignment with Libra. For now, it's not a Scorpio season for you. But see, Venus is in your third house. Let's see, actually, is it during your whole life? Yeah. Well, until the age of 100, Venus will stay in your third house. So for you, it doesn't change. This is also significant. If Venus stays in the same house, then there is almost like something that remains the same. It could be your interest to learn, it could be related to other things in interactions or communication. Sometimes it could be about friendships, but um, there is something which is like a foundation. It's like a foundation for you and it stays there. Yes, well, we check until 100. You may live more. That's why I'm saying that, maybe it's not your whole life, but until the age of 100. We are joking, but who knows? I mean, what might be possible decades from now. So, yeah, 200. Who knows? Yeah. So, and through this, we can see Venus story. Okay, so do you have any questions or any shares about this? I'm happy you enjoyed it. It's always very interesting, to work with real charts, real life. Okay, perfect. Very tied to the collective and me having to work hard. Well, you have a stellium in Capricorn. So, and Venus is trining also your stellium. Yeah. And the other thing is that Venus is exactly on the cusp of third house. Any planet which is that close to a cusp of a house, for example, Pluto is also very close, but Venus is like, the same degree. This also shows more significance and more connection. Yeah, astrology is amazing. I was thinking, I'm considering, to do something like weekly webinars for practices. So, yeah, maybe I will, yeah, start this from next week. Great. Perfect. So we can do this. The best joy is when you find other people who love what you love, like that's the greatest of all. So I honestly really and deeply appreciate you because this is really important for me. Okay, so if there are excited people like me, then we can do it. All right. We'll see. We can switch from NATO to some predictions too. We can do whatever we want. Okay. So I think that today we will pause here. And yeah, I think with the we did a astrology reading except of a GSR session, but we go with the flow. So tomorrow we have the last class from this particular series. So yeah, I will see you. Hopefully you can join us. Have a lovely day. And many thanks also to Annie for sharing her chart with us. Thank you, Annie. So see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.